Hello and welcome to What the Tech from Boast AI, where we talk with some of the brilliant minds behind new and exciting tech initiatives to learn what it takes to tackle technological uncertainty and eventually change the world. Today, I am thrilled to welcome to the show Ian McCarter, the Director of Corporate Innovation at MaRS Discovery District. MaRS is the world's largest urban innovation hub. Based in Toronto and operating since 2015, MaRS supports startups in the health, clean tech, fintech, and enterprise sectors that are reshaping cities around the world, standing at the forefront of a wave of change that extends from Melbourne to Amsterdam and across the entire globe. In Ian's role, he's focused on creating meaningful economic relationships between Canadian ventures and globally significant early adopters of innovation. In particular, Ian has been helping energy, mobility, real estate, mining, construction, and heavy industry partners inject Canadian innovation into their net zero journey. I'm excited to pick Ian's brain on what it takes to drive innovation in the current market, dig into what urban innovation looks like, and in particular, how important community, in its many definitions, is to building a successful, innovative business in 2024. So, without further ado, welcome to the show, Ian.
Hello, nice to meet you, and I'm really excited for the conversation today.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. I know that we were chatting off camera both earlier today and last week about how I see MaRS everywhere. I've been on a bit of a road show over the past year since I joined Boast, and I'm just thinking back to at SAS North, at Elevate. You guys are on the scene, and so many of our guests actually have been part of what you guys do over at MaRS. But before we dive into the MaRS mission, I want to learn a bit more about Ian. So Ian, tell me, how did you get into the space in the first place? And maybe what of your particular passions that really made this a good fit for you over at MaRS?
Yeah, I think particularly well for myself, as you mentioned off the top, I lead sort of our corporate innovation work here at MaRS, and so that's really all about accelerating the adoption of early stage technology. I think particularly here in Canada, you'll often hear we don't have an innovation problem, we have an adoption problem. And so I think that's really where I get fired up about is how do we actually take these innovations that are coming out of universities, that are coming out from across Canada, and how do we actually commercialize them and make them into full-fledged companies? And so that's really where, as you mentioned off the top, in whether it's clean tech or we might get into today around active mobility. It's really these areas of how we can actually help these companies grow and scale.
Absolutely love it. So I'd love to know a little bit too. I had mentioned it in the intro a little bit too, but urban innovation. Now, what are we talking about specifically when we're saying urban innovation in the context of the businesses that you work with at MaRS? Because from my understanding, you are not pigeonholed at all in the innovation that your teams are driving. In fact, you had mentioned it, active mobility. I want to go deep on that, but when I hear that, I don't instinctually think, oh, okay, in urban setting, we need to improve all of that. Unpack that for me.
Yeah, totally. I think what's unique about MaRS is that there are many types of innovation hubs around the world, but many of them are located in these areas that aren't right in the downtown core of a major city. And so that speaks to the community that we have in this sort of core place for innovation. Is right next to us are a bunch of research hospitals, for example. Across the street is the government legislature, the provincial government legislature. We're a couple of blocks away from Bay Street, which is the main financial sector. And so we're really at the epicenter of where innovation happens, from government, from startups, and venture capital and other capital providers. So that's what makes that urban innovation very unique to MaRS compared to other incubators or accelerators that may not have this full community wrapped around it.
Absolutely. So I'm going to call back to one of those events that I had mentioned earlier, but I remember at Elevate Fest, I was so impressed at how many members of your team were there, but also, like you said, the resources across the immediate Toronto community and just immediately in Canada. I think you raise a really good point that if you place your accelerator geographically or your incubator in an area where there's just going to be organic interactions no matter what, because you're physically near where the innovation is happening, you're near those research institutes. I'm even just thinking, I don't want to get ahead of myself, the quantum of it all and how that's all happening outside of Toronto, and it's bigger there than anywhere in the world. That makes so much sense as kind of a driver. And again, to your mission specifically around driving teams towards net zero and clean tech, I can only imagine that you can only do that when you're in a setting where you're not having to travel super far or necessarily burn carbon. It's kind of baked into that net zero mission. So that is really, really cool to hear. Now, I'd love to talk about some of the projects that you're working on. We named
Yep.
active mobility. Could you explain a little bit about what you mean in that and maybe tee up some guests we're about to have on the show in a few weeks who are in that market and I'm really excited to talk to?
Totally, yeah. So even just picking up on your point previously about the place where we are, like we have just over 1.5 million square feet of real estate downtown here in Toronto, and again, it has all of those different elements within the building here, which makes it quite unique. But I think and where I work personally is with a lot of our large corporate partners. These are large multinational organizations. My team, we work with about 30 different partners across the world, and they see Toronto as a place for innovation, whether it's to net zero or whether it's around adopting AI technologies. It's really that center where they can come to a major North American city and meet with all of these different types of entities in one place. And so we do that very often with our large multinational partners. One of which is one that you were alluding to, which is around Toyota, and we've been working with the Toyota Mobility Foundation on exactly just that. We started a project with them, I want to say just over a year now, which when you think about Toyota, you think about the car manufacturing and things like that. But we've been working more with their foundation side all around a term called active mobility. That's really focused on helping individuals lead a more independent life. These are a bunch of different types of technologies that we would consider in that space. Think about accessibility technology for persons with disabilities. Think about assistive devices, for example, that can help from that perspective. Or think about rehabilitation technology for whether it's persons with disabilities, or if you think in our lifetime, we may be in a car accident or things like that where we're temporarily not mobile. And so it's really focused on how do we enable people to lead a more active lifestyle. And so we started a partnership with them a year ago to really lead to where we are today of helping support 7 startups really get the pathway to commercialization and help them grow and scale in the space by throwing pretty much everything that MaRS and the community has to offer at these 7 companies.
Love everything that you just brought up. I'm going to take it back real quick to also just the actual physical footprint of MaRS Discovery District. It just clicked that you guys are literally the Discovery District. That million plus square feet that you have in Toronto, that is the district right there. So that is super, super cool. Now to the active mobility of it all. And might be a weird question or even a tough question to answer, but why would a business like Toyota want to support these active mobility businesses? It's a little cynical, but I guess what's in it for them? They're a massive behemoth company. They have that car business. I would not think that they would be in the startup game necessarily, but give me a little bit of insight there.
Yeah, I think this is really the distinction between working with the Toyota business
Yep.
proper and the foundation. The foundation is really hyper focused on impact at the end of the day, and how can they progress different social initiatives related to their business in a meaningful way. And so that's where it's not like they're looking at areas completely outside of the car business. If you think about people moving, and that at the end of the day is a big part of their business, and so that their philanthropic initiatives enable them to really help people get more mobile. And so they have two sort of main focuses in the foundation. One is around this active mobility space. The other is around smart cities. And really what they found was they've run a bunch of initiatives across the globe to encourage or spur innovation in these particular areas, which are maybe traditionally underfunded. And what they found was it's great to spur innovation in that area, but what's next? And that was the whole genesis of this idea of what we call the Mobility Unlimited Hub, is the what's next. How do we create a community around these innovations that we're trying to grow and scale to actually help them make the meaningful impact that these companies are trying to make. And so that's this mentality of a hub and a community. In this hub, we have currently 13 different community members, including University Health Network, their kite arm, University of Toronto, Sheridan College. There's a full list around there. But it's how can the community provide the right supports for these particular technologies at this time over an extended period of time to really help them cross the chasm or grow and scale their companies.
Super well put, Ian. And I'm going to bring it back to the Toyota of it all too, to maybe not be cynical, but now broad to a fault. They're ultimately in the people business too. They need to make sure that you had mentioned it earlier. We're all at some point in our lives going to face a mobility issue. It's kind of an inevitability. We're humans. We age. It happens. And Toyota's in the business of making sure that people can move like their cars in one direction, but even on the philanthropic and on the impact, social driven, that initiative, it all still is of a theme. You're making sure that people are capable of achieving what they want to do. You're empowering them. So I don't actually see that as separate from their larger commercial mission either. At the risk, again, of sounding too broad, hey, let's keep people moving, but Toyota, you want to do that. And well, I'll digress. This isn't off the record, but I'm waiting on my Prius C to get delivered from Carvana today, actually. It's been delayed 3 days, so I'll have
Nice.
you get in touch with Toyota for me if it doesn't materialize
There you
shortly.
go. There you go.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Now, I want to dig into a little bit more about the Mobility Unlimited Hub. Could you give me a little more flavor around what being a member of that community looks like, and maybe what's available to people or businesses that do want to join that community? What can they expect to access from those resources like the University of Toronto and others?
Yeah, totally. And I think it's important even to take a step back from that, as we started this journey with Toyota Mobility Foundation with some upfront research about a year ago to understand the challenges and barriers associated with innovating in this space and what is specifically unique to innovating and creating innovative solutions in the active mobility space, because it is quite unique compared to your standard SaaS solution that companies are going and adopting. And so we didn't look at it necessarily from the lens of what is it that a person with disability is facing. There's tons of research that already exists, like mounds and mounds of research that we looked through to help inform us from that perspective. But our angle was more, what is preventing innovation from happening in this space? And so that's where we sort of started on the journey, and that's what led us to say we need to create this hub or community where there's a variety of different services available in a time-bound space to really help move the needle for these companies that exist. And so we went through a process to actually design out a particular program. And it's important to note that at each step of this process, we involve persons with disabilities at the core of this. Is sort of our phrase that we've been using is nothing about us without us. And making sure that not only the design of the program, but the startups that we select are actually solving problems that persons with disabilities are facing. That's kind of where we started on that journey. And there's the thing that we learned along this journey is that these supports existed already in different pockets. UHN Kite is doing a lot of work in this space. Sheridan College is doing a lot of work in this space. There wasn't anyone bringing all of these different supports together, and so that's where we see the need around here, and the different community members where they can provide a bunch of different supports. An example is Sheridan College, where their Center for Intelligent Manufacturing, where some of the startups in this hub are the next generation wheelchairs. The challenge they're trying to get to is, how do I get from being able to produce 100 of these wheelchairs a year to how do I produce 1,000 of them? And MaRS won't support them directly on how do you manufacture these things, but Sheridan College can. And so how do we enable the ecosystem so that and Sheridan College has matched funding that can help with those projects, and can also encourage students to be part of those projects as a bit of a talent pipeline to these startups. So it's a win-win-win for everybody in this scenario. And so my message here is that this isn't a closed community that only a certain few organizations are part of. We're actively out in the ecosystem looking for other partners that can provide supports to these startups to really throw the kitchen sink at them.
Absolutely. And I mean, you started listing some of the programs on offer that people can tap into with or without necessarily joining an incubator program. But I gotta say, I love that. Again, what is preventing innovation is where you guys led from. And a lot of that is just, again, getting it all in one place, making it all accessible, making it so that you don't have to jump through hoops. I'm thinking back to, we had a podcast with Neil Weitzman from Porch last week. Neil is the coolest guy, but I love how he's like, there are entrepreneur communities and there are immigrant communities. We're the only ones who are merging it together right now. And it's not the same ethos, but it's a similar ethos in that, sure, to your point, there are resources for scaling, but there's also resources for actually deriving the innovation and for actually getting it to a place that it's workable, building up that MVP. You're bringing that middle ground and making it smaller so that it's not going to be as much of a journey to get from point A to point B in that context. And that is so, so cool. And I got to shout out to the R&D funding programs on offer in Canada. I wouldn't be on the Boast podcast if I didn't mention it, but you don't have to be part of a program necessarily to tap into some of the amazing funding that supports R&D, which is at the heart of the innovation that you guys are driving here. I mean, it is unique. It is technological uncertainty. It's tackling that systematic investigation. It's doing all the above. And that is stuff that the Canadian government wants to support as well. So even beyond the academic and institutional resources and the incubator and accelerator programs, there are just funding avenues in Canada, unique to Canada, even unique to Ontario, that teams can tap into that will help them get there. It's all about leveraging all of the resources within the community. And again, at Boast, we're happy that we can be a part of this community, even ancillary, but it's amazing work that you guys are doing. And I'm just so happy to hear about it. And I'm going to be hearing more because we have people from the Mobility Unlimited Hub joining our podcast in a few weeks. But without spoiling those episodes and knowing that we're almost at time too, Ian, I'd love to know what some of the stuff that's on deck for MaRS DD, specifically what's within your purview that we can maybe forecast over the next year, whether it's some of the businesses we're going to be talking to, or even other exciting initiatives that you have on the calendar throughout 2024.
Yeah, totally. And I think, just to your point, even around shred and stuff like that, like these are all important aspects of commercialization at the end of the day, and enabling commercialization. And the more visibility that we give to these startups and other organizations that these are types of supports that exist, the better off that these companies are from that perspective. But what I'm really excited about over the next year is the current iteration of the program is a 1-year program, and so it's going until May of next year. We are actively looking at how do we turn this into a self-sustaining program for the long run. And that's what I'm really excited about building out over the next couple of months, is how do we move this from an MVP year one type of thing to how do we create and self-sustain this community over the next 5 to 10 years?
And I gotta say, I mean, I'm here in Boston. I'm the American on the Boast team, but we have a lot of innovation down here. It's very much within one field. It's very much within the biotech for the most part. We do everything. I'm not bad mouthing my friends here in Boston, but I am always so impressed by the innovation that's being driven out of Toronto. So I feel like MaRS and you in particular, Ian, are the ones who will make this more than a 1 year cohort in an ongoing self-sustaining innovation ecosystem. Just because the tools are there, the passion is there. It shows in how you're presenting all of this to Ian. So I am so excited to learn more about the great companies within the Mobility Unlimited Hub and also just all the great work that MaRS is doing as we continue this relationship. But Ian, I cannot thank you enough for hopping on. This has been an
I
absolute
love
pleasure.
it. Thank you for having me.